You're listening to an episode recorded during the time Inovation Fuel was part of University Canada West. We are proud and grateful for the work we've done together, and we want to thank the university for being in our podcast. We are now excited to continue the journey of Inovation Fuel into its next chapter. Thanks for listening. Hello, everyone. I am Dave Kison.
And I am Gelareh.
We are educators, entrepreneurs, and the hosts of this podcast, Inovation Fuel.
Inovation Fuel is brought to you by University Canada West, an innovative business and technology university.
At University Canada West, we believe that our students are the future of Canada. We arm them with tools and bring real-life stories into the classroom. Our students have explored many of the business models discussions we talk about in this series during their classes.
Dave, I have some good news to share with you. Students are using some of our episodes at the classrooms. Instructors and the students are happy about it because they can learn from the local businesses with the small businesses knowledge, and they can know more about the businesses and their challenges, and the students can focus and solve their problems.
Wow, Gelareh, that's exactly why we set out to do this podcast. To get those students really engaged in solving business problems in the real time. I love to hear it. I want to hear more. You got to share more with me. Let's have a chat. But right now, we can't. Without further ado, we got to jump here. We got to get this train on the go. Let's ignite today's episode of Innovation Fuel. So, Gelareh, we're going through the process of launching the Innovation Hub, and, we've brought in consultants to help us with this, and I tell you, I definitely need a consultant because there's a lot going on in that space. But, when we talk about consultants, what is the importance of consultants?
First of all, consulting is for transferring knowledge. A person or a company, they have a specific knowledge on the specific fields, and rather than you spend your time to reinvent the wheel, to figure out what you do, you can hire a consultant or a consulting firm to help you to get through your problem. I always say to my students as well, if you want to use a consultant, first of all, you have to find out what your need is. If you don't have one, the consultant can help you to find what your need is. Sometimes you say that what I want, but what you want, it does not mean that's your need is,
Yeah.
And the consultant can actually go to the root cause and find out what exactly you need and why this happened to you.
And this comes back to our discussion around collaboration. I think, we no longer in the world of entrepreneurship of anything are we taking an individual approach anymore. Why reinvent the wheel when we might have some expertise out there on our team or external on our team that we might be able to bring in to add that value?
That is exactly good questions, because most of the companies, they're looking at reducing the costs, but they cannot see in the long run, if they don't use the consultant, if they don't use the collaboration, they have to spend more, right? So maybe in the short term, they are spending more, but in the long term, they actually reduce their costs. But you have to find a consultant that you trust, that consultant, not just the knowledge, in the relationship as well. You have to build a relationship with your consultant, and consultants should be good making a relationship with you because you're going to trust that person or that company. So the building trust is the key point of the consultancy.
Yes. I love it. Let's get into our conversation today with Ralph, and maybe Ralph can give us a little bit more information about how he might build that trust. Let's get going.
So Ralph Kison is a consultant. He's a business owner. Basically, he's in the Vancouver. He have different services: is strategy, coaching, consulting, and training. Ralph Kison, can you introduce yourself to us? More details.
There's more than that. Love to, yeah.
Yeah, and more specifically, tell us a bit more about your journey to becoming where you are today, too, as a consultant or an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for the opportunity to share. And let me very quickly say how I got to being a consultant, an advisor, a coach, a trainer, which are all sort of varying roles that I play for different clients. is it started with a passion years ago. I always wanted to be a teacher, and I was going to be a high school teacher. So my path was more to get into the school system. And then while I was going to college, I had 3 jobs, and I discovered sort of vicariously I was an entrepreneur. And so I did a bit of a course correction rather, and ended up getting into, first of all, headhunting. I was a recruiter, so I was helping people advance their careers, and I was teaching at a local college and night school. And I found what was just most fascinating, what got me going, was helping people get better at what they did. So better at selling, better at managing, communicating. So that then eventually led to a position at a company I was with, where one of the partners walked in one day, closed the door, sat down, said, "Ralph, I'm sorry." And that we usually know what that means when they close the door and they're pretty serious. And it was 30 years ago, actually, this year, this summer, that happened. And that set in motion, interestingly, a number of other events. So as I like to say, it's often setbacks, failure, and major challenges that launch us in the direction that we really need to go. Now, at the time, if you would have said, "Are you having fun? Is this great?" I would have said, "Absolutely not." It was terrible, right? I was in my early 30s, and I thought my world was collapsing. And in some respects, it was, from a career and a personal point of view. But what it really did, it was the turning point for me to do some introspection and reflection and say, okay, I've been talking about going out, making a difference, being a teacher, but not in the school system, but really in business and working with people to develop and train them. So what are you going to do? And it was my wife that said, well, you've been talking about this. You're now in a position where you've got nothing to lose because you don't have a job, right? So, why did you give it a whirl? And as they say, the rest is history. And I did. And that's now, this coming January, it'll be 30 years ago. So I started off and kind of worked from home. And then April 1st, no joke, I got an office in downtown Vancouver. And I was in business, and I had a desk, a chair, and a telephone. Literally, I remember sitting in this office, and air conditioning was. I opened the window and I opened the door, and I created a draft from the end of the hall. I mean, it's not a glamorous start, but it was one of those. I had an idea, and I believed in myself, and I thought, well, I guess the worst case that can happen here is this doesn't work, and I go back and get a job. Because it was interesting. After I was let go, I had a number of clients that I was recruiting for come to me and say, "Hey, do you want to come and work for us? You can be a manager, you can be this." And so I felt confident knowing that if I tried this and it didn't work, I could get a day job again. But I really believed that this was something that was important to try. And I felt very deeply about it. I was very committed to it. And so that's really kind of that's what launched me into this.
So fast forward to today, and now you have this business. Tell us a little bit more about this business and everything that you do.
Yeah. When people ask me what I do, let me start with this, Dave. I say I make people better. And they go, "What's that mean? Are you a doctor?" They say, "No, I'm not a doctor, but I kind of do what a doctor does in the sense that if I work with an individual as it relates to coaching, if I work with a company, an executive team as it relates to whether it's succession planning or strategy work, or a management team to help them become better managers and leaders, I diagnose. So like a doctor, I first assess. I just don't go, take out the prescription pad and write them, say, take this and try it for a month and call me. Because I think it's very important especially if the people that are listening today, if they're thinking of becoming a consultant or an advisor or a coach, you just don't walk in with a suite of services and say, well, let's spin the wheel and see what works for you, because you have to start to see if you can help them. So my premise is I can help make you better if there's a fit, if there's a need. And so I start with an assessment, and then I move into whether it be coaching, consulting, do some still training work. Right now, obviously, that's not in person, although starting to do a bit of traveling, things are opening up. I've really shifted my business to doing a lot of webinars now. So how I do it is in person, virtual, and for a few people by phone. They still don't want to be on a screen. So it's you deal with all kinds.
So most of your clients are individuals or corporate?
No, there's a real blend, actually. In most of my clients, let me further refine this. I work primarily now in what I call the professional services sector. Engineers, architects, construction firms, accounting. So anyone that essentially is selling their IP, they've got intellectual property or system. So it's not that they have a warehouse full of boxes of stuff that they need to sell. Although I do have some clients that still sell products, and I work with them. but most of them are people that are looking to sell their ideas and their concepts. So that could be an individual. And what's been really interesting in the last 5 years, I'm finding more and more that I'm getting approached and working with a lot of millennials, people that have, they got out of university maybe 10 years ago. They got into a company, got a job, they moved up, they became an associate or maybe even a principal. And then they decided, I just don't want to stay in the corporate world. I feel I can go do this on my own. And so they are now ready to bridge that gap. And I can really relate to a lot of them because that's like my story I shared with you. That's kind of what I did in my early 30s. So I get why they're now going, is this the time to make a move? So I get people that are looking to make a move, people that just want to be better as a leader or a manager, and then executive teams that realize they need a third party to come in and, quite frankly, stir it up a bit. Somebody who's will have the trust, but can come in and speak the uncomfortable truth, right? Because I will go in and I will ask the questions that it's often better for me as a quote outsider, third party to ask than for them, because then I can what I call triangulate the issue. So I can make it an it. So it's not personal now. It becomes objective. And I just did that yesterday with an executive team for an engineering company. There were like 9 of them plus me, so 10 of us on the call. And we did exactly that. So there's some very difficult conversations that need to be had, but often an outsider who has the skill and ability and experience to do this is best to come in and facilitate. So that's the other thing I do.
And so you've started to narrow down into this target segment. So did you understand that target segment when you first set out, or is this sort of something you've learned along the way to really narrow down to this specific target?
Yeah, if you knew me, David, I work primarily with engineers, and I'm the furthest thing from an engineer, right? Yet, when I started presenting, it was through an association that I'm a member of here in Vancouver, CSMPS. And there's a lot of professionals that are members. I had 2 partners from an engineering company come to me and say, could you come to our company and talk about that? That's really good stuff. And that literally opened the door to speak. And then through associations, engineers and geoscientists of British Columbia, they're a provincial governing body over engineering and geoscience, started doing work with them. And then it literally snowballed, because what I realized, and here's the key, what I really help technical professionals focus on is their emotional intelligence. I mean, that's a bit of an oversimplification, but they're very left-brain, technical, analytical. And back then already, when I started doing this, and even more so now, they realize that there's such a need for the softer skills, communication, building rapport, trust, leadership. And so not being an engineer, but understanding and appreciating what they do and being able to come in and teach them those, what I'll call soft skills, has just opened that field up to me across North America.
So you are focusing on organization development, build a team, resolve the conflict that they have, and they make them better team player, right? And for achieving the goal of the company. Am I right?
That's right. And the other thing is helping them to decide what not to do. I have a simple little S-curve model. It's. I mean, if you can just visualize, these S's linking into others and ascending. And I believe that personally, as we go through our career, and I've witnessed this decade by decade, if I think back to where I did in my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, 50s, and so forth, and when I work with people, I see distinctive patterns where as we move from one decade of our life to the next, we also shift personally and emotionally and relationally and intellectually. And it's important for us, just as it is for an organization as they grow, to know when it's time to drop something. So that's part of this, is first of all, figuring out what we're not going to do. Then what do we keep? Our core competencies. What are we best at? Where can we be world-class potentially, like the good to great kind of concept, the hedgehog concept. And then what do we aspire to? And again, now through COVID, I've seen companies I'll use the word pivot, right? It's been around forever, but they're really doing big time pivoting now out of necessity. But I'm also seeing this as kind of the push that I think a lot of organizations have needed, but were afraid to take because everything was going fairly well. So why risk it if you don't have to? So now organizations have stepped up and stepped out, as I call it. And so that's part of what I also do, is really challenge them. What do you get rid of? What do you keep? And then how do you move forward as an organization? And sometimes that even comes down to the people. Do you have the right people on board?
And then with this element, how do you build the trust with them? Because, being a consultant, stepping in and saying, hey, these are all the things I'm doing great, or these are the things I'm doing bad. How do they know that you're the individual that is going to give them what confidence that that you're speaking what you're able to do?
Yeah. I start from the perspective of saying that if Dave, you were a prospective client, I'd say, I'm not going to assume that we're going to be able to work together. I'm going to ask you some questions to understand your values, the culture, the outcomes you seek, how you're going to measure, and if you're going to hold people accountable and be engaged. And if you aren't, I may not even give you a proposal, because I'm not looking for another client. I am looking for an organization and people that I can connect with at a deep philosophical level where we can make a difference. And when you start off, and it's not just a tactic, like I really mean this, I have my core values, my value prop is defined. So I start from that, because I have to be true to myself first and foremost, because if I don't, I can't have integrity when I work with you. So then I know who I am. I got to figure out who you are. And then I may even ask you the question, and I know sometimes it sounds kind of cheeky, but if after I've said, here's who I am and what I do, I may even say, Dave, why should I work with your firm? Tell me why I should seriously consider putting a proposal in.
It's very good one. The point customers comes with, they tell you what they want, but when you talk to them, you understand that this is not what they need. Right? They need something else. For example, I will come to say that, I want to have a very good team building. We want them new teams. But then you figured out this is a problem of the recruiting, for example, or this is a problem of you don't have shared value.
Yes.
Yeah. So you find it out. The customers need something else. You find the root cause. But how you can convince the customers to pay for what they need rather than what they want?
Well, it's to create a bit of dissonance, because too often consultants, and I got to tell you, when I first started my business, I took that long-term value approach, and I can still remember, literally within the first couple of years, standing in the office at the time, explaining to my first employee, saying, "This is what we're going to be." And she probably thought I was nuts. I'm pointing at the ceiling and I'm, painting this picture, but in my mind, it was clear, because even then, I wasn't looking to find projects and work primarily for financial gain. It was to find companies I could work with where I would have impact. So that meant that I started from a different reference point. And again, going back to my make people better doctor analogy, I think the key role of a good consultant and advisor is to diagnose on his or her own terms, to understand, because you got to remember, if we come in, we're the expert. They're calling us because they have a need that we might be able to fill. So why you don't go to the doctor and say, hey, I got a pain here and there. Here's what I need a prescription for. And he or she gives you it and you walk out. They say, well, not so fast. Let me do some investigating, an x-ray, an examination, blood tests, right? They make up their mind as an independent advisor and assessor. We have to do the same thing as consultants. Otherwise, what's our value prop, right? You're basically an order taker at McDonald's. You drive through the window and you want it supersized.
Which this inevitably opens up to a lot of where consultants fall into this trap, and I is that they start to give free away, and they start to not define that element. And I think this is where the challenge goes, is not having that solid understanding of what your value offering is.
Absolutely. I may be wrong on this, but was it Socrates or some philosopher said, know thyself? Like, you got to start with knowing who you are. Right. We're not a weather vane when the wind comes that we turn in the direction that the wind's going. And again, this is so central. I'm just delighted we're talking about this, because we need consultants and people that are, and if they're listening and watching today, if they're thinking about this as a path, don't go out there and be an also ran and a wannabe. Be independent, be unique, be singular. Because the world needs more people like that, because we can have impact and bring about transformation rather than just get a client or a project. That's not tough, right? That's actually fairly easy. Having impact and making a difference, that requires a bit of backbone, vision, and obviously some skills.
Yeah, it's good. But how you can convince an engineer, specifically our Eastern engineers, same as me, Chinese people, Indians, though it's right and wrong for us is not, it means it's just black and white most of the time. Engineers, especially if you're from Easterns. No?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's how for immigrants, same as me, I was engineer.
Yeah.
And for me, that time, everything should be right or wrong. That's it.
Yep.
But in our human relationship, it's not something right or wrong. Sometimes it's about very gray area. How you can convince an engineer team, an engineer corporate to listen to you and buy your product?
Great question, because what I will do, and I run into this so often. Let me give you an example. I had an actual case or example where an engineer in one of my sessions years ago, as I was presenting something, was around business development, how to engage clients and build relationships. And I said, a lot of this is emotional and relational. And he said, I don't agree. All my decisions are logical. I said, okay. I mean, I can't say you're wrong if that's how he sees the world.
That's exactly what they said. I always said it before.
Of course. But here's how I answered that. So I said, let me ask you a question. When you bought your last car, was there no emotion? Like, didn't you look at the style and the design and the color? He said, nope. Consumer reports, I assessed it, safety, mileage, warranty. Okay. I said, what about a house? Like, you got to live somewhere. He says, yeah. No, I worked with the realtor, did my research. Okay, fine. And then I said to him, are you married? And he said, yeah. And I said, so tell me about the criteria that you selected for your wife, where all the factors and the, yeah, exactly. And he goes, wow. And I said, well, that's my point. Now, here's the interesting thing. So the way I would address this with an engineer is I would say, you make all your decisions totally based on logic. And they'll say, well, not really. And I'll say, well, if you go out and try to sell or promote your company purely on logic, and we know for a fact that most people make almost all of their buying decisions ultimately on emotions and feelings after they've thought it through. It has to make sense. So I agree. You have to start with logic. But if you can't transition from logic to emotions and engagement, you're not going to grow your business. You're not going to get good work. You're not going to get paid what you're worth, actually. So let me segue real quick to this. We now know researchers have identified we have what they call three brains. There's the head brain. There's about 100 billion neurons. That's how that brain works, right? So more of that analytical. Then there's the heart brain. We've got about 40,000 neurons, a lot less, but this is that feeling brain where emotions, memories, and relationship connects. And then there's the gut brain where we have about 100 million neurons. And we know now that, and I just love this because for years I always thought, well, we make gut decisions. We now have the evidence to know that, if you accept the three brain concept, that gut brain is actually telling you things that you need to know. It's that intuitive, sixth sense, instinctive response. Engineers, just like salespeople, have all three brains. So I would come back to an engineer and say, let me tell you about how you're actually wired. Let me tell you about your company, about your employees, and what you're trying to achieve. And if you are working purely from the head brain, you're actually missing 2/3 of the equation. You're not functioning fully and completely. And then I don't really care if they like or agree with what I'm saying, because my job is not to go in and try to convince them. It's to put it out there. They can do the research. They can Google it and see if I'm making it up or what I just said is factual.
So this is the way you explain them that makes them want what they need, right?
Yeah, and here's just again, yesterday, this client I was working with, and the CEO, he's an engineer, and he started talking about what they need to do as a firm to move forward is to focus on emotional intelligence. Here's an engineer saying, guys, as we grow our business and lead, we have to become better at EQ. We got more IQ than we need, right? Got lots of that. And AI now is going to be doing a lot of the math for us in the next 3 to 5 years. We're not even going to have to do what we do now. It's going to be relationships. So you tell me how you're going to continue to build relationships purely on a logical basis. Their heart, their gut. You support them with the brain.
And it's true, because you need to know how you're going to get there. You need that bigger picture element, so people have to buy into it. Like, we're only checking the boxes if we're just showing up and doing this element, versus if we're there emotionally and committed. I see a lot of benefit there.
Ralph, can I ask another questions about how you find your client, or how clients find you, and how you pick each other? Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because I don't prospect per se anymore. My business comes 99.9 through referrals. I mean, I'll meet somebody. I mean, I've met an architectural client that I've been working with for years. We met one of the principal's wives on the beach in Mexico 7 years ago. And he came, we had breakfast and talked, turned into a relationship, right? So I find what I'm now doing is, and this is actually a really important point for anyone that's listening that's planning to be a consultant or is one and wants to build a business. I believe very strongly, and you opened with when I did a presentation for Yvonne's class about personal branding, you as the product, know your value proposition. I think you have to start from the perspective of knowing who you are and what you offer and send the message out. So through social media, particularly LinkedIn. I've been blogging and I've been blogging now for probably 12 years. I've been vlogging for 3 years. And I use that as a way to create a voice and a presence and a following. And I don't want everyone, if you think of Seth Godin, if you're familiar with him, he's one of the marketing gurus. I've heard Seth a number of times, and in his last book, This is Marketing, he makes the point that you're better off to have 100 loyal customers or followers or advocates than 1,000 people that like you. So what I've focused on is positioning myself, well, first of all, stating who I am, knowing who I am, and then putting it out there, and then letting the market decide over time as they get to know me through watching my vlogs or blogs or meet me at a conference or something to see, can I trust the guy? Is he competent? Can I connect with him? And then obviously we go through what we talked about earlier. I say do an assessment and see if we could work together. But I really don't try hard to go and get clients. I try to be appealing and attractive. And I've talked about this in the past where I say, become a person of interest or become a company of interest, right? The more interesting you are, the more it's like a planet, like Earth. We have a gravitational pull. If someone sees you metaphorically as a planet and they start getting interested and they want to know more and more, they get drawn in. See, now we start with a connection that is more relational, organic, rather than marketing driven and incentive based.
And so we're leaning towards the 80-20 rule, and the element now, and more probably, is that we talk about this in marketing is customization and personalization. Now you're getting these clients, you're coming through referrals, some mostly elements. So I think the biggest challenge too that I find for consultants, and maybe you can talk to about, is that the value that you provide and the cost you should charge. Yeah. Because I think the biggest element is like, how much do I charge for this? It's such an element. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that, Ralph, about how you come to that value pricing element.
Absolutely. And, Dave, years ago, I would do the by the hours thing. And I still every once in a while have someone say, well, for you to do something, what's your hourly? And I now just say there isn't one. I don't do hourly work. I made a decision probably 5 years ago to move from hourly to project to fee-based because lawyers love them. I got lawyers and friends that are lawyers, and they're great people, and we need lawyers. But so often when someone mentions a lawyer, it's like, oh, I charge you for everything. And use a paperclip, you pay for it. Well, they're a business, yes. But what we need to do is not be stereotyped that as a consultant that we're available by the hour, because your value proposition is then equivalent of a plumber or an electrician. Nothing wrong with that. Like, if I hire a plumber, I want to know how much you're going to charge me per hour. But it's more tactical work. But as consultants and advisors, or as David Meister, the trusted advisor, if you're familiar with that book, that concept, to become a trusted advisor, we need to have a value proposition that is commensurate with our fee. And that doesn't mean lowest fee, because I think too many consultants undersell themselves. They underprice themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And engineers, coming back to that comment earlier, I've really gotten in engineers' faces over the years because there's this race to the bottom. One undercuts the other undercuts the other. If you're the engineer of record and you're signing a document and you have legal liability and go to jail if something goes wrong, why are you discounting? You should be talking about the value, the safety, the engineering, like everything you bring to the table, not say, okay, we'll do it for 10% less. To me, that's what I really get in. But I love debating with engineers. I say, now you tell me how that's logical if everything you do is logical.
Mm-hmm. I love it. This element of the pricing element is, and the value that you described is like really getting to that point of matching the value that you're offering. And it really comes back to what you said before, is that value proposition element. If you understand your value proposition, then you can clearly ask for the value that you are worth in the market.
Yeah, and you've got to buy yourself first, if I can put it that way. It may sound a bit weird, but if you wouldn't pay for yourself relative to what you're proposing in terms of the fee, how do you expect somebody else to buy it? Like if you don't think you're worth it, and that's part of what I do. When I help people create their elevator pitch, right? It's been around forever, it's from marketing and that. But I find it so interesting. So many people struggle with creating their own elevator pitch. They always default to the company they work for. And then I go, no, it's you I'm talking about, not your company. They really struggle with that.
How can our listeners reach you?
Well, they can go look up Ralph Kison. I mean, I'm easy to be found, or just go Kison, KISON.com. You'll end up on my website. That will lead you to my blog. If what I said interests you, you want to get LinkedIn, put my name in LinkedIn, I'll show up, send me an invite, and just mention this so I know where you're from, and we're off to the races.
So that's great. To all business owners out there, thank you, Ralph. Thank you, Gelareh. To all business owners out there, we have a fleet of enthusiastic and knowledgeable students here at UCW that can't wait to help you in your business with one of our capstone projects or internship programs. So reach out to us. And if you think you have a story that our students can benefit or our listeners can benefit from, please reach us at www.ucanwest.ca/innovationfuel.
Thank you, Dave. Till the next time.